Okay, well, welcome to the Sanctuary Radio Show. Thank you for kind of hanging around waiting for us to come on. So we're going to be talking about pleasure today. I have Dr. Jazz is back. So just, hang with us for a little while and we will start the actual show with Jessica. She's going to bring us in. Welcome to the Sanctuary. You're listening to DC Radio 96.3, HD4, and DCRadio.gov. I'm Wendy Cherry, your host, and how perfect is it that today is Black Love Day? So happy Black Love Day to everybody. So I wanted to introduce our guest here, Dr. Jazz. So welcome again.
Hey,
welcome back.
Welcome back.
And I want to just share a little bit about Dr. Jazz. So Dr. Jasmine Abrams is a community health psychologist and research scientist who examines psychological and cultural factors related to health behaviors and health outcomes among marginalized populations, focusing on women of African ancestry. She is currently an assistant professor of community psychology and behavioral medicine at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And this is what we're going to focus on today. She is also, so you got a lot going on there, Dr. Jazz.
Going on.
You are the founder of the Spice Experience. So the Spice Experience is a company specializing in the promotion of sexual health and pleasure for women via education and skill building. Mm-hmm. I've never heard of that before.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Let's get into it.
That is so awesome. We're going to get into it. But what I want to talk about first is Black Love Day. So how apropos is that? So let's just talk a little bit about that really, really quickly. And Black Love Day is in its 26th year. Wow. Bet you ain't know that. Mm-mm. Did you know?
No.
Jessica, did you know? Nope. Okay. So it's in its 26th year. And it was created by Mama Ayo Handy Kendi. And it is celebrated on February 13th, which is today. We usually are green, but I'm just date stamping this today. It is the third nationally observed African American holiday, a holy day of atonement, reconciliation, celebration, and a 24-hour demonstration of Black love. Doesn't that sound right?
I love that.
That sounds awesome, right?
Yes.
That sounds awesome. And you do that through 5 tenets. Now, the 5 tenets of loving acts. So this is not just something you're going to hashtag all day. This just ain't something you're going to get on a t-shirt. We're talking action. So acts, okay? So the 5 acts are for the creator, for self, for the Black community, and the Black race, and the Black family. So that's 5. Black Love Day is an alternative to the commercial Valentine's Day. So it's really about self-love and the love of our families and the love of our friends and the love of our community and for the creator. So that even sounds better than some chocolates and some, and I ain't knocking chocolates, especially if it's cacao at like the 72% or higher, the dark chocolate. But what I'm saying is there is another more deeper situation that Mama Ayo has created for us. So if you can go on Twitter and you can go on all the socials and just see the hashtags there, but also be more for the next 24 hours. If you don't do something, love yourself. Mm-hmm. And here is where we bring Dr. Jazz in, because this is just one of the ways. So you love yourself in mind, body, spirit. This is in body that we're going to talk about here in this way. And so we're going to be talking about sex and the gaps of orgasms in sex. Mm-hmm. And, just those types of things. So we talked about Dr. Jazz. And so now let's talk about what I'm calling the pleasure principle.
I love it.
Janet Jackson, she had that Evian bottle and she was like, the pleasure principle. So the Spice Experience, in addition to all of the other studies that you're doing around women of African descent and how we're marginalized around the world, not just here in the United States, how did you get to then think about the Spice experience and the need to create a movement like that?
It was actually two sort of things that were happening right around the same time. In my professional life and then also in my personal life. So professionally, I've been doing sexual health research, HIV prevention research for a number of years. And I went to another researcher's talk. Okay. She was also a sex researcher, and she started her talk by saying, I'm a researcher today. Like, okay.
Okay.
And she said, but I'm not going to talk about sex in the way most researchers talk about sex. Most of the time when you hear researchers talking about sex, it's about bad things, negative things associated with sex. Unintended pregnancy, STDs, difficulties people are having. She said, today I'm going to talk to you about good things related to sex.
Okay.
And I thought, oh my goodness, I've never had this conversation before.
Right.
So she proceeded to present her work on sexual activity and depression. And essentially her findings were for women she actually prescribed sex to depressed women in her study.
Wow.
She told them to have sex 3 times a week. It could either be partnered sex or sex with yourself. Okay. Masturbation. And what she found was that half the women in her study ended up coming off of their depressive meds after 3 weeks of having sex 3 times a week.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's almost like duh, but I also think it's not. It's specifically depending on where you live and your spiritual practice and how you're socialized.
Right. Absolutely. All those factors are hugely important. And I think related to some of those things, sort of what was happening in my personal life, being a graduate student, I was starting to unpack some of those things in my own life.
Yeah.
And I actually, so a little self-disclosure, had my first orgasm in graduate school.
Okay.
And I was thinking, what in the world? Is this what was supposed to be happening all along?
Right.
So I start asking women in my family, cousins, aunts, best friends, loose associates, anyone who would entertain me on the topic. Have you ever had an orgasm before?
Right.
And I was shocked that most of the women I spoke to had not.
You said most of them had not?
Most of them had not. And most of them actually said, I don't know. A good number said no. But for the women who told me I don't know, I said, oh, certainly you have not.
Right. I was going to say, I feel like you would know.
You would certainly know.
So it's so funny that you say that because I didn't have my first one until after college. Right. And so my sister and I used to always like joke about it. And so then one day I called her and all I said was, I know now. That was it. Because I could never reconcile why there was so much hurt and pain around sex. So for me, I'd always experienced it in hearing about it, about something bad. Somebody got pregnant, or somebody had some disease or something, and there was trauma about it, or he left me after I did it, or whatever. So I hadn't even considered that there could be something good about it. But then I'm just like, well, why do people keep doing it if it's so bad?
Right.
Like, why are people losing their families? Why are they cheating on each other? Why are they creating so much pain to those who they have mistreated during this act? So why y'all keep doing it? And so I did it. So then my I know now wasn't the pain part. It was the beauty part.
Right.
So I get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about some stats.
Okay.
So you sent me an article from Psychology Today, right? Psychology Today. So we're talking real data here. And in one study examining about 800 college students, there was a 52% orgasm gap, right? So what we're going to call this is the orgasm gap.
Right.
Okay. That is 39% of women and 91% of men said that they usually or always experience an orgasm in partnered sex. No wonder. All right. Because that's why the guys are just like, yeah.
Right.
And we're just sort of like, okay. Right.
I could go without.
Right. You know,
Right.
And then in a stats in a PubMed article that I found that 3,000 single women and men in the US ranging from 18 to 65 years old, when having sex with a familiar partner, the women said that they had an orgasm about 63% of the time. But the men, they still like blazing the trail. They're at 85%.
Wow.
Lucky you guys. Okay. So now this was the most hilarious part to me. So the question was asked in the article, why is there a gendered orgasm gap? Why, Dr. Jazz?
There are a host of reasons. When we think about differences between men and women culturally and societally and how we're raising men and women around issues related to sex, there are a host of reasons. One of the main reasons, in my opinion, is the overemphasis on sexual intercourse as a means for orgasm.
Right.
And then also the prioritization of the male orgasm.
Right.
And when we sort of whittle those down into like what cultural phenomena really supports these two factors, we're looking at patriarchy. Patriarchy showing up in the bedroom.
So let's just go back and define patriarchy for the people.
Yeah, so patriarchy is essentially this cultural phenomena where we have prioritized and overvalued men and their well-being. And it's this ideal about men being the head, the most important, and essentially overvalued in comparison to women.
Overvalued. Yeah. Okay. So that pretty much means that the guys are trying to get theirs. And we have been socialized to help them get theirs by any means necessary, or we'll feel like less than, and then we don't get ours.
Right. That's exactly what's happening.
They'll be asleep and you'll be like,
and I think that's one of the primary examples when we look at sex as an act and see that most of the time sex ends when a man loses his erection. When a man orgasms, it's done.
Yeah.
It's done. We rarely see that when women orgasm. We rarely see that, oh, well, I got mine, so I'm about to roll over and take a nap in the shower or get a bowl of cereal.
Right. So why do you think that we would play second? I mean, we've been socialized to, but really what does the data show, or what does your research show of why we are willing to play second fiddle and allow that to happen and not advocate for our own pleasure?
Yeah, I think, again, the patriarchy piece, but when I actually did a research study with Black women looking at barriers to pleasure and what might prevent them from experiencing orgasm, and we heard a few different things. One was that women generally as partners are focused on making sure that their partner is pleased.
Okay.
And there's evidence for this in that when we look at the orgasm gap, we definitely see it between men and women.
Okay.
But when we look at relationships in which there are two women, we don't see an orgasm gap.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, so some people think, oh, well, the woman's orgasm is just much harder to get and, it's all complicated. Not so. It might be more difficult or more steps involved in comparison to a male orgasm. But when you look at two women being together sexually, the orgasm gap disappears.
Wow.
In terms of partnered sex. It's insane.
Yeah.
Why is that the case? Because women are focused on pleasing their partners.
Right.
When you put two women together and that's happening simultaneously, that's also a big part of it too. Yeah, being familiar with the anatomy.
Okay, so the other thing is that women that was in this PubMed study is that many women are plagued by body image and self-consciousness during sex. So, and it says it's pretty much impossible to have an orgasm while you're worrying if you look fat or you're holding your stomach in.
Right.
Like,
right.
I can see that.
Right. And I've had a lot of friends too, especially women who've given birth, and not just friends, but women in my research studies who talked about, you know, after birth, that was the hardest period for me to try and like get my sexual mojo back and really feel beautiful or sexy or desired. Women talk about having stretch marks or their breasts being saggier, being a little bit more overweight than they're accustomed to, and thinking about all of those things, maybe even thinking about, does their vagina feel looser? A whole human just came out of it.
Hello.
Those are some of the concerns that I've heard from women. And if you're thinking about that while trying to have sex, you're not going to be able to be fully present for the activity.
Right.
And it's going to make it more challenging for you to actually experience pleasure and subsequently orgasm.
Right. So I looked at this study also, and it said, finally, reaching orgasm requires a complete immersion in the sensations of the moment or the mindfulness. So you're not being mindful if you are worrying about your stomach, or if you're worrying about if the baby's gonna cry, or somebody's gonna bust in, or if God's gonna strike you down.
Right.
Because then there's that.
There's
that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about a little bit about that.
Okay.
What has your research shown? Like, as far as, well, I don't have the research. I just have the experience. I have the experience of being in specific spiritual systems where they tell you, while you're on your back, God is looking in your face, and you will be condemned for having sex, for fornicating, for for seeking out and experiencing this pleasure. And I can't even say for half the people I spoke to that it was pleasurable. One of my first experiences was being at a slumber party with my friends. Now, I'm in the 10th grade. They are in the 12th grade. I'm still a virgin at this point. I was a late bloomer, okay? because of this night. So I'm sitting there listening to my girlfriends who I have known for many years talking about how painful their experiences are. Now, these are just seniors in high school at this point, but they were just talking about how they didn't enjoy none of it. And there was not one like giggly, woo, it was good. It was all like, and there might have been 8 of us in this room, and I'm the baby in this room. So I remember hearing the stories, and so I'm becoming traumatized. And the last word that I heard was, one of my girlfriends said, "Wendy, don't do it."
Wow.
That's what she told me. And because the little guy that was peeping at me and I was peeping at him at the time, that was one of his almost requirements. And I did not, I did not accept that challenge. And so then I was dropped. So they were trying to say, it's okay. Just let it go. And so I did. And it was just funny. But then therein came, so already having the spiritual part of it, being afraid,
right,
and then having my girls that I loved, and I know that they were holding me down and looking out for me, because I did not want to be as sad as they were telling me these stories, sharing these stories. So then I go to college, and then I hear they know who's allowing everybody to sleep with them. So then they the hoes. So now they're talking about the hoes. And so I'm feeling like, okay, how can you win?
Yeah.
Because the girls the guys, they'll sleep with her and then they'll talk about her. And so, and then you start to see women who are standing in their power sexually, but then they're looked at a certain way. Whereas the guys, they like, that's just what they do. So can you help us like deconstruct some of what that is?
Yeah, I remember in the most recent study that we did when we were talking to women, one of the participants in the study called it the lap cloth syndrome.
Lap cloth.
Lap cloth syndrome. Okay. I had never heard of it. And I was like, please do tell us what that is. And essentially she was saying that, when you're in church, in some denominations, if your skirt is too short, the church mothers are gonna come on over and bring you a lap cloth. Yeah. So you're not sort of serving as a distraction to the men in the church, so that you yourself don't look too available, loose, overly friendly, etc. And she was saying for her, that was one of the primary sort of indicators of this culture of sort of repression of women's sexual nature, their desire, their ability to exude sex freely. And she was also talking about how that plays into relationships and sexual encounters with women who've been socialized in a religious context. There being this desire sort of culturally for women to show up as prude. Yeah. You don't want to show up like you know what to do. Right. Okay. Because if you know what to do, then that means you've had some experiences. Right. And if you've had some experiences, the most ready assumption that people are going to make is that, oh, you're a hoe. You're a hoe. You're a hoe. Oh, man. Right. So, yeah, I think religion has definitely played into people's experiences and as sort of a barrier in many instances. And I don't want to say it's always a barrier, but in this context,
it ain't always a barrier because there's lots of little babies that pop up on the church girls. Yeah. Exactly. so it's not a barrier. But so this is the thing. So I also want to talk about is human. And it's natural. It is. So the fact that the babies did probably pop up, it was only because they were listening to their instinct to procreate. And so it's really difficult even for me now with a mom of a 16-year-old beautiful little baby girl, and what it means to have these emotions and to have this energy that's natural. There is nothing bad or evil about it, right? It's just how you evolve and how human beings have evolved and how we procreate and how we extend our lives, our species pretty much. Yeah. And so it's been interesting to try to balance that kind of, what the media says. Then they got Instagram, and then they're showing all different types of things. Right. And so what do you think about that? So the women actually in my study talked about social media in particular as a barrier to their sexual pleasure. So they talked about how if it's a man they're in a relationship with, and we were interviewing and doing focus groups with heterosexual women. So they said, if I'm like dating a guy or if I'm in a relationship or married, I'm looking at what he's liking on Instagram and on Facebook. And when I'm scrolling through and seeing that he don't like, Big Booty Keisha's photos, and I know I don't look like Big Booty Keisha, that's what I'm thinking about when we're laying down to have sex. Like, is he imagining me as Big Booty Keisha? Does he wish I was Big Booty Keisha? Or just the anger of like, oh, he's so trifling. He liking those photos. He know I'm gonna be upset about it, Right. And that's the headspace that you're in when, all of that is a distraction from the actual experience that you could be having. Right. So that's interesting because you can also be desensitized so young. And so did you ever, talk about any of that, or has any of your study groups or any of your friends ever just talked about, like, there's so much out there? I remember a few years ago, I saw this meme and it had somebody was doing something and somebody posted, oh, that's what they doing out there now. I have no, I'm out. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm tapped out. Like, there's so much going on. How much of that is really real? Do you know? In terms of like the actual things people are doing to achieve pleasure, or? Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is real. People are doing things. But, what I want to do, let's just put a pin there for a second. Okay. So if you write that down where we were, let's talk about the pleasure center. Okay. And why people are trying to get this pleasure in this way. So do you want to explain it, or do you want me to explain it from your scientific?
Well, I can give you what I know from science. So there's sort of a pleasure triad, if you will. And on that triad, we have eating, which provides, pleasure for us.
Yes.
Sleeping, which provides a certain degree of pleasure.
Yeah.
And sex.
Yeah.
These are three of our, I want to call them basic needs. And some folks would argue with me on sex being a need. But at our most human sort of level, there is the desire to at least have sex.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many benefits from an evolutionary perspective. We're thinking about sex being something that not only sustains our humanity and like allows us to populate the earth, but there's so many benefits to
like what?
Sex, in particular orgasm.
Okay.
That hopefully will be, for example, you're going to sleep better if you're having orgasms. You're going to have reduced levels of stress. Your immune system is going to perform better. You're going to be at a lower risk of cardiovascular disease.
And that's the number one killer. Okay.
Come on here.
Okay.
All right. Like there's so many different benefits, elevated mood, and even orgasm sort of, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. So the more orgasms that you're having, the more likely you are to continue to have orgasms in the future. The more vaginal lubrication you'll experience during sex. So it's like literally the gift that keeps on giving.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So now who don't want that?
Who don't want that?
Yeah, like I'm thinking all of my friends that I'm thinking about and people that I talk to, we trying to sleep better.
Right.
We're trying to have less stress. Mm-hmm. And who don't want a healthy immune system?
A cardiovascular system.
Right. So I can tell you about it from an eating perspective because it's the same thing. So when you're born, you have that dopamine that comes through when you're bonding with your mom, if you've been breastfed specifically. And then there's a little teeny bit of sugar that comes through her breast milk, the colostrum and then the breast milk. And that gives pleasure to the baby. And then the human being will always be hunting and seeking that pleasure.
Right.
And it comes in many ways.
Right.
It comes in chocolate. It comes in drugs. Because the body doesn't know how it's getting it. It just knows that the pleasure is what it's seeking. It wants that dopamine feeling. It wants that good, energetic feeling.
Right.
And so sex is one of the ways. And so that's also, in my opinion, why people just keep going to try to find it because they want that pleasure. Yeah. And so maybe in some instances, they're not in good relationships or they're not safe. But in a safe relationship or in a safe experience with sex, then I feel like then you get your shot of you sleep better, you're less stress in your immune system is enhanced. So,
and for women in other research studies, what they've found is that women are actually having more orgasms in longer term committed relationships
because of the safety issue.
And some researchers have hypothesized that it's the safetiness that women feel with a longer term committed partner. This is someone that they can communicate with and they feel safer telling this person, actually, babe, can you do it a little bit like this? Or next time I want to try it like this.
Right.
And when we actually look at that particular strategy, sexual communication, it is the number one strategy cited for increasing women's experiences of orgasm. Simply telling your partner what you want to experience in a sexual encounter can be enough sometimes to sort of sway the pendulum, if you will, and increase your opportunity for orgasm.
That's amazing. I mean, communication usually is good in any situation. So now let's talk about, you said that women in homosexual relationships, lesbian relationships, the orgasm gap is smaller, right?
It disappears.
Oh, it disappeared. Okay. So what is it that they're doing? I mean, I'm thinking, so I don't have the science behind it, but I'm thinking that women know what women like. I've heard that term many years. And then something has to do with the clitoris, in my opinion. So talk to us about the clitoris in general.
So for most women who are experiencing orgasm during partnered sex in particular, the clitoris absolutely positively has to be stimulated. It's a very small percentage of women that exist in the world that don't need clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm during partnered sex or period.
Okay.
So clitoral stimulation is hugely important. And sometimes that's not happening during partnered sex. It might happen before, during foreplay.
Like they'll think that's the foreplay.
Right.
Okay.
But it should be all the play. It should be happening continuously throughout, if possible.
Yeah, right. Okay. So the clitoris in my studies has like 4,000 to some odd thousand pleasure nerve endings.
Yeah, actually
9,000? 9,000 pleasure endings, nerve endings.
Yeah.
And it was created specifically for pleasure.
Specifically for pleasure. And it actually has, so men often talk about like the head of their penis being the most sensitive part. And science has also found that the head of the penis has the most nerve endings in comparison to other parts of the penis. But the clitoris has at least twice as many nerve endings than the head of the penis has.
Right.
So imagine that sensitivity amplified.
Right.
You know?
Okay. And so, I think women do know this because I think when you're little, you figure that out. I don't think you know the science behind it, but I think if you're a curious little child, like many of us were, yes, Cole, really. Yep. See, we trying to learn you something. Okay. So, I think you find that out when you're young, but you don't really know the science behind it. You just know, oh, that felt good. Oh, okay. Well, let me just keep doing that. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you get the conditioning from society that says, if you keep doing that, you're going to get the hairy palms. And I even heard that you could go blind. Haven't y'all heard that? I mean, y'all know y'all heard that. I heard that all my life. I always heard people say that. So it was always a scary thing to consider masturbation because I wasn't trying to get them hairy palms and I wasn't trying to be blind. And so I think that, and then we're talking sex education. So you said sexual communication.
Right on.
And with sexual communication, there has to be education.
Right.
And so the education part for me was in the 5th grade when you got your little letter. Well, my mom shared the basics with us, right? What a mom would in the 70s share, don't bring no babies home. And we had this really cute book called Where Do I Come From?
Oh.
And it was a cartoony book, and it did show a little detail about the baby and whatever. So my mom was always cutting edge and an early adapter of things. So we had that. But then I remember in the 5th grade, it was sex ed time. Mm-hmm. You had to get the note home. Mm-hmm. And then they talked about probably very basic things. Right. And for the girl, and it was separate, the girls in one room, the guys in the other. Uh-huh. And then they talked about the period.
Right.
And up to that point, I would think, publicly, maybe only a few girls had their period, but they were the ones where everybody was going, so-and-so had their period. Mm-hmm. And she was feeling like, and this specific girl was Audie in like the 5th grade, right? So I can imagine how uncomfortable she was because we knew she had her period. I don't even think, did we think that made her sexual? I don't know. But that was the education. Mm-hmm. And then that was it.
Right.
So we have my brother here, Cole, talking about, really? And he about 45. So, to never know these things, it's the communication, but the education. So talk to us about how using the Spice Experience, your company, that you help to educate at least women, but then where do the brothers get it from?
Yeah, so let me just take a step back. So right now, the current administration that we have is actually advocating abstinence only sexual health education. Okay. And that's a huge challenge, not only for people like me who do sex research and sort of advocate sexual health promotion and disease reduction and prevention, but it's also, if we're doing abstinence, we're going to be in a much worse space with regard to pleasure than we already are in, because there's a huge lack of comprehensive sexual education. So even in the school systems, there's no mention of sex for pleasure.
No,
even
I've never heard pleasure until like maybe last year. Like that you could have it for pleasure.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though I really do believe kids earlier than the sex ed starts have a realization, an indication that sex is something that people are doing for pleasure. They watch TV, even when you have them close their eyes, they're doing like this, watching a movie, and they are understanding that this is something that people are doing to experience something that seems to be a good thing.
Okay.
Even though like the parents might be saying, this isn't for you, you're a kid. And so, yes, with the Spice experience, I'm trying to make an effort to offer people some comprehensive education, some knowledge, particularly women, about their bodies, about the benefits of orgasm, the importance of orgasm. And what I affirmation in the beginning is that you're entitled to this.
I wrote deserve down here.
Yes,
this
you
is what
deserve,
I wrote.
sis. You deserve. If it's something that you're going to be providing for yourself, you deserve it. If it's something that you're going to be doing with a partner, you absolutely deserve it. As much pleasure as we try to provide for others, we deserve that same amount and sometimes more in return.
Yeah.
It should be a relationship that's like symbiotic. This is something where we're both giving, we're both receiving, and it's not just necessarily one person's responsibility to make the other person happy. And men are sometimes in the opposite position where they are, definitely the individuals who are prioritizing their partner's pleasure. But when we talk about statistics, it's more often women who are in that position, who are prioritizing their male partners and end up being neglected. Sometimes
I think that the men are so in their heads, and because it's just set up for them this way, they don't even have a clue that even though there might be action taking place, that what's happening in the mind and in the heart and in the spirit of the woman is not what's being portrayed there. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like we set them up too, to even, go for what this is, to let them have their happy ending, and then we not feeling fulfilled, and then we'll go talk about it.
Yeah.
But, because like you're saying, we don't have the education. We might know what feels good to ourselves, but we don't want to say it for fear of whatever. There's lots of different fears. So so for those of us who are on the radio, we have a Facebook Live going, and our new side brother, Cole Parker, says he doesn't agree that a small amount of women only have non-clitoral orgasms. Quite a few of them have G-spot climax as well, and they do.
You're right.
Yeah, Cole, we're not saying they don't.
You're right, but statistically, when we survey thousands of women at a time, there is a small minority of women who are having G-spot orgasms without clitoral stimulation. Generally, when women are having G-spot orgasms, there is a combination of stimulation through the G-spot and the clitoris at the same time. And if you look at women's sort of internal makeup, when we think about the clitoris, actually what we're referring to when we say the clitoris is only the clitoral head. The clitoris actually extends out.
It looks like a wishbone.
It looks like a wishbone almost.
Okay.
And we often leave out those parts of the clitoris that also have a high concentration of nerve endings. And when you also look at the internal anatomy with where the clitoral head sits and where the G-spot can often be stimulated, those regions are very, very close to each other.
See, that's the education that we need. So where would somebody even, okay, so you have the Spice experience. And what is the experience that you provide to? It's just women.
Right now, we're just women. Although I have gotten many, many messages from men, like, when are you doing something for men?
Right. Because I think so, like, going back to the deserve part, if you've already been brainwashed into thinking that it's bad and that it's evil and that you shouldn't do it, if you shouldn't masturbate, and that you should only be in certain kinds of relationships. So, like, one of my questions was, I was making an agenda, And one of the questions was like, who gives us permission to access pleasure? Like, who are we giving the access to say, yes, you may, or no, you may not? And yes, you may, but just in this way. Why are we, well, we are conditioned to do that. But so let's shift the mind and think that we have agency over our own pleasure.
Yeah, it has to.
So is that kind of like what you teach?
Yeah, and definitely like right in the beginning, we do some affirmations and we talk about the power of affirmations and why women actually deserve these things, the benefits of orgasm, and not just physical benefits. So early we talked about physical benefits, but there's some spiritual, mental, emotional benefits as well.
Dr. Jazz, we're on the same page. I wrote spiritual right there. We're on the same page thinking about it, because there are lots of benefits, and I am not claiming to know many of them, but I know that it keeps coming to me to study, and it keeps coming to me to learn more about those spiritual ways, because what I'm told is that your sexual energy is your energy to connect to the creator. And for women, in your womb area, that's your most creative area. And you're either, so I like to say, you're either creating a baby or a business or an idea or a concept. You know what I'm saying?
I literally have that written down. Creative, life-giving energy is what we have the power to manifest through our sexual pleasure and through orgasm. Literally, there's some women who sort of harness this power that we have through sexual pleasure, and they masturbate at strategic times. So, you know, if I'm looking to give energy or life to something, I'm going to masturbate before I do it so that I can fully bring life to this project or this business, or even writing. Some women say that they masturbate before writing to sort of really help get their creative energy flowing, or before doing any sort of work that I call deep work, where you really, deep brain work, where you really need your brain energy to be functioning at its highest capacity in order to do some really good work. And some,
that's amazing.
Yeah, some practitioners, I'll say, have also cited this energy as a healing energy, particularly when women are able to have the G-spot orgasm that Cole mentioned, those vaginal orgasms that so few women have actually ever experienced in life. Less than half of women have experienced
I'm on the other side, but it's not often.
Enough. And it's not often enough, but these particular orgasms can literally undo years of sexual trauma, years of hurt and pain, and undo years of stress. Like literally they harness a huge resource of power.
It's so interesting. And this is TMI. My mom is probably like, that Wendy. But you know, when I was like, I know now, it was you know, a vaginal orgasm. And so that was sort of like the first one I had. So then I didn't know I had to like step back and downgrade my joints. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not what I was intending to do, but I realized that's what happened. But anyway.
Yeah, there's actually a woman, I'm blanking on her name right now, but she's a great sort of resource in terms of being a source of knowledge around these topics. And what she actually calls clitoral orgasms are like paltry, like for what kind of orgasms in comparison to a deep vaginal orgasm or a combination orgasm where you experience the vaginal and clitoral orgasm together
at the same time. That's interesting. So I really love the like the bringing together the mind, body, and the spirit. So we talked about the mind part of it, where, you know, we have to be mindful and be able to like block the other things out and get laser focused.
Right.
And I would say on knowing ourselves first. So this is me being the mirror and the guide. I'm in the mirror here talking to myself about like, that's something that's really important so that you can go back and have the communication about what you like and have it unapologetically.
Right. And I will say too that some women actually have a hard time arriving at that first step of what do I like. Because generally in sex, they're so focused on what is my partner like? Does he like this? Is he enjoying it? Oh, is this going to make him feel better or make me the best person he's ever had? That there's none or little attention focused on what do I like? Am I enjoying this? How can I communicate to him? And sometimes women are afraid of bruising the male ego. Like, I don't want him to feel like, he messing up, or I don't want him to lose his erection or feel bad about this or not think he's my best partner. So I'm just going to keep quiet about it. And that's one of the things that can sort of prevent women from communicating. But going back, just knowing what you like.
Right.
Knowing what you like. And for a lot of women, that's discovered through self-love and self-pleasure. Mm-hmm. Some women, it's discovered through having a very attentive partner who's willing to take their time and explore, do trial and error with you to figure out what are some of the things that you like, what don't you like. And even with regard to self-pleasure, there's one study that I also love done with thousands of women. They identified at least 12 different strategies that women use to bring themselves to orgasm.
Send me that article.
I'll send it to you.
Okay. And I'll put it in the notes for you guys.
And for you guys. Essentially, that's just a message. The take-home message from that is that there are so many ways.
Yeah.
And all 12 might work for you. One might work for you.
All you need is one.
All you need is one. But it might take you 12 different times or 12 different types of activities to figure out what's the best approach for you, or more than 12.
True that. And so I do, so we were talking the spiritual part just this 1 second. I do want to go back to if you are not getting this energy, then you can become stagnant. And the stagnancy in the womb creates all types of havoc on us too, including what I'm learning is fibroids and PCOS and other things, and sexual traumas, whether you've been touched when you didn't want to be, or whether you just had sex with somebody that you didn't really want to, or you wanted to, and then they hurt you afterwards. So then you internalize the pain. There's so many different ways. So what you're saying is that, having sex in a safe relationship, they don't have to be your straight up partner, but having sex in a place where you feel safe and comfortable, and then you know what you want, or you can have somebody be willing to work with you on figuring out what you want, then that could be healing. So we're talking Marvin Gaye sexual healing.
Marvin was on. Okay. Marvin knew. Okay. He knew the song is golden, and that's legit.
I could tell he did it when he had on them tight green pants. And the way he was moving, I was like, I think he knows something. I'm in the 6th grade when figure it out. But I was like, Marvin knows. Marvin be knowing. Okay, so let's talk about some of the strategies you teach, because I think we have like 12 minutes left or so.
Okay.
What are some things that the sisters can do? And for the one brother who might be or might not be listening later, what can we do to help us start to explore?
So when we're thinking about self-pleasure in particular, and I think that's a great place to start if you're having trouble orgasming or experiencing sexual pleasure with a partner, starting with yourself, I think is really, really awesome. Some women have challenges with the idea of touching themselves at all, period. So moving beyond that, even if you got to take some baby steps. Some women have actually never seen their vagina. A lot of us will use a mirror or whatever we have to look down there, check it out. But some women don't. Some women are like, don't look at it.
Right. And then I heard recently this woman say she saw it for the first time and she didn't like what she saw. So then that was extra trauma.
Right. And I will say too, often one of the misconceptions about self-pleasure is that you need to watch porn in order to sort of get going or get some inspiration. And some people do, and that's fine, but it's not necessary. Okay. And when you're thinking about like the influence of porn and sort of popular media on our perceptions of what our bodies should like, there are a million different ways that the vagina can look. And it changes all over the world with what a desirable vagina looks like. So in the States, what I've heard is that a desirable vagina is like one where the external lips, the outer labia, cover the inner labia. Like you don't see the inner labia.
Okay.
But in another country, they are actually stretching women's inner labia because that's a more beautiful vagina, to see the inner labia coming out of the outer labia.
Think about that.
Which I've seen awful things online about like, oh, it looks like, this person has had X many thousands of partners because her vagina looks like this. Vaginas come in many different shapes and sizes. So I think looking at, and this is one of the great things about the resource I mentioned earlier about, it's called OMG Yes. And it's this really wonderful compilation of women's experiences with self-pleasure and even partner pleasure too. But they actually give their strategies and they show you on their vaginas, like, this is what I do to my vagina to achieve an orgasm.
Oh.
And then you can actually practice. If you use your cellular device to access the content, you can practice on their vagina and it moves with your finger. Like it's one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen.
Wow.
But it gives you practice with actually utilizing the technique on a vagina that looks normal. Some of them are shaved. Some of them are not shaved. Some of them have ingrown hairs. Like these are standard everyday vaginas, not a vagina that has been sort of primed and pampered for your television purposes.
Right. My goodness.
So yeah, starting with yourself and figuring out, utilizing some of these great resources like the one I just mentioned, figuring out what brings you pleasure, I think is the number one step. One of the things that I recommend to women in my classes, if you're having trouble, start with trying to simultaneously stimulate all 5 of your senses. So that's going to help you, like going back to our earlier conversation, be more present, be more mindful. If you are smelling something that gets you in the mood or makes you feel sexy, if you have on, sometimes women only put on lingerie for a partner, but they like the way that they feel in lingerie. Like it's, some women will say, well, I'll do it for myself, like earlier in the day, if I know I'm going to have sex with a partner later on, because it makes me feel sexy. You can do that for yourself also.
Okay.
So you got your aroma therapy going on. Maybe you got some candles, you got some music. We all have our songs that get us in the mood. Listening to something that gets you in the mood. Visual. So if it's pornography that gets you in the mood, if it's using your own imagination, some people think about, maybe a Morris Chestnut, Michael Ealy, Idris Elba, but whoever it might be for you, your boyfriend from 12th grade or college, or, whoever the individual was or individuals are, like drawing them up in your imagination. Sometimes that works. Reading.
Okay.
Erotic literature also sometimes works for women. But whatever it is, like really trying to draw you into a place of sexual pleasure, bring you into the moment, get you off of whatever happened at work, get you out of whatever's happening in the news,
get you out of your own mind,
whatever your body looks like, whatever you're self-conscious about, get you out of all of those things and really just get you into your body, what you're experiencing, what feels good to you, and just being there. And one of the other things that researchers have found have been helpful also is not thinking about the end goal. So sometimes our preoccupation with like, well, I've been trying this for 20 minutes and nothing is happening, will take us out of the experience of pleasure in and of itself, and could possibly, like our preoccupation with experiencing an orgasm might also lead us to not experience the orgasm because it's another thing that's keeping us out of the present moment.
Right. Those are some good tips.
Yeah.
So you have the Spice experience and you go around and you teach these principles, and she's coming here one of these days. We're gonna do something here.
So we have to do
But
it.
so like, what are the women saying since you've been doing it? What has been your reaction? And then I want to know what has been the reaction, but what did your mom say when you told her you were starting this?
So I don't want to put my mother out, but she had an initial, like, very, like, really, Jasmine, this is what you're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
But then she got into it,
Okay.
and she was excited about it. She came to the launch event, and she's also been inquiring about different tips and different things. So she's gotten into it, and she's been supportive, and I'm appreciative. And then what was your other question?
Like, what has been the impact that you've heard from women?
Oh my goodness. So one of my favorite reviews or comments from a client, and so let me also say, in addition to teaching self-pleasure, we also teach women skills for pleasuring their partners, because that is something that's very important to women, as we've seen in our research. And that also helps to provide women a sense of sexual confidence that helps them be present in the moment, that helps them get out of their minds. If you know you putting it down, you don't have to worry about like, dang, is he enjoying it? I don't know if he likes it. Does he want me to be Big Booty Keisha? You can see that he wants you to be exactly who you are, doing exactly what you're doing. So we give women strategies for partner pleasure as well. And so one of my clients from a partner pleasure course, she said, and she was on the verge of, like they had already gotten engaged. They were about to be married. She wrote me afterward, that was the best sex we've had of our entire relationship. And afterwards, he was like, what happened? What was different? What did you do? Where did you go? Like, tell me what the difference was. And honestly, she didn't even get a full class. She got a teaser class. Okay. So these tips and these strategies are working for some folks. Another one that I love, another review that I love, was a client that told me her and her partner actually got pregnant on the night that she used some of the tips and tricks from the class. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's awesome. What do you see for the future for the Spice experience? I know you kind of just launched in the summer. Was it last summer? At the very end. But like, since you're getting this feedback, what do you want it to do moving forward for women? I want two things. What I envision in the future, one is this being a resource so women can come to the classes. We also do fun events like bachelorette parties, birthday parties, those kinds of things. So utilize us as a source of fun, but you're also going to get some knowledge and skills while you're getting the fun. And then also utilize us as a resource for improving your sex life via class, or if the class group thing is not for you, we also do individual consultations as well. And who's we? So I have a team of really awesome young women in Baltimore that have just really stepped up and supported my vision for this work. Okay. So it's two primary women, but we also have two other women that work off-site to sort of support the vision of the company as well. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now we have 3 minutes left. Yeah. So let's talk about where they could find you. Right. And then let's talk about like your final last tip. Okay. Strategy or whatever it is going to be to empower the sisters and whoever else wants to be empowered around sexuality and pleasure. Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at The Spice Experience. So keep in mind the word experience is spelled with an X. So we start the word experience with an X. Okay. So The Spice Experience, or you can find me or us at our website, www.spiceexperience.com. And again, there you can book us for your private party. You can find out when our upcoming classes are. You can also purchase some of the toys and other resources that we recommend. So you sell things on your site? Okay. Yeah, we sell things on the site, often at a lower price than you're going to find at your other retailers, same products. And then in terms of my last tip, so there is a woman that I absolutely love. She inspires me. And her name is Audre Lorde. And I'm trying to pull right now a quote. What I'd like to leave folks with is a quote from Audre Lorde. Okay. Here we are. She wrote this beautiful essay on the power of the erotic. Okay. And so she talked about how we often relegate the power of the erotic to just the bedroom. Like, we just want women to be sexually empowered, and that's great. They're going to have great sex and experience the benefits of great sex. But what I took away from that essay was she also talked about how that power extends beyond the bedroom.
Okay.
And leads to a generally more empowered woman. So I want to leave you guys with a quote. She says, as women, we need to examine the ways in which our world can truly be different. When I speak of the erotic, I speak of it as an assertion of the life force of women, of that creative energy empowered, the knowledge and use of which we are now reclaiming in our loving, in our work, in our lives.
That's beautiful. And we'll end there. Thank you, Dr. Jazz. Thank you. This was such great information. I'm going to get that quote from Dr. Jazz and we're going to put it in the notes. And until next time, we'll see you again in the sanctuary. Peace.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you. Did you learn something? Awesome. I'm happy.
I saw Jessica going. That's funny. Okay, we're trying to end this broadcast. Then we're waiting for this thing to end because I want to make sure it ends and it doesn't delete.
Oh, that's
that can't happen.
I need a cup.